Hey, so today's video is about slightly different. I don't know if I've ever talked about these people, but I think it's about time. I'm going to recap a few. That was a bit needy behavior, Phoebe. That was very needy of you, wasn't it? You just slipped into my underarm. Anyway, I don't think I've spoken about these people, so I'm going to still recap a few things just for you guys, if you haven't seen anything on them, to also get the idea of what's going on here. But before I do that, subscribe. YouTube is closing accounts and unsubscribing people and doing the whole thing, apparently. Like, comment for engagement, and everything else will be in description that you need to find, including my new podcast. So please go, oh, I just scratched myself. Please go do that. The LaBrant family. There's Cole and Savannah, they have children. I don't really want to focus on the kids too much, and I will be blurring them out because obviously I'm just not a big fan of showing other people's kids on the internet, even if the parents have shown the kids already. I just feel icky about it. Moving on. So he actually started on Vine, and he would do like weird videos and like just typical Vine stuff. And then they went over and they tried a few things on the internet, on YouTube, to kind of get to this point. And now they're essentially a family channel, but a lot of people just have a lot of issues with the way they go about parenting and the way they go about using their children on the internet for, I guess, monetary gain, including having their kids basically look after one another. And like, I know that happens in a lot of families where, for example, money is tight financially, that they can't afford babysitters, the parents have to go to work. You know, I do understand that parents do struggle and they need that support. But when you're a multi-millionaire family who makes so much money on the internet, I'm sure you can afford a babysitter so that your children have an amazing childhood, right, where they can just like play and do what they want to do, right? So a lot of people have, Phoebe's shedding, she's in her shedding season. It's everywhere, actually. So people already had a lot of issues with that, but even just besides that, using the kids for clickbait, using the kids in thumbnails and titles, which obviously I won't be showing you because I don't want to show them. Besides like the typical family stuff, it's comparable to the Ace family and all the other ones. Like, I feel like we kind of know this now. There are a few other scandals that I wanted to cover before the most recent one, just so you guys understand, like, this isn't a one-off, like, we're just like building, you know? So for example, a few years back, I can't remember off the top of my head when, but I'll find out. A few years back, there were fires in California, which were like awful, like one of the worst we've seen in a while. And as California has droughts as is, but this one was really, really bad. People were evacuating homes. I believe it was like a few celebrities even, because it obviously made news. They're not going to cover every like regular house that burns down, but obviously when a celebrity's house burns down, it kind of makes more national coverage. Yeah, I know. For example, I think Miley Cyrus lost her house and a few other people. It was widespread, like houses were just burning down. It was really awful, a lot of casualties, etc. So people were really just on high alert, like just looking for news about it. If you didn't live in California, or you had family in California, you were like watching all the news, trying to figure out, you know, where it is, what is happening, how it's going, you know, who's evacuating. And they thought that this was a perfect moment to clickbait having to evacuate their house. Now that all would have been, you know, I guess educational or informative if they actually had to evacuate their house, to be like, hey, like this is the reality of it, like this is how things go, let's care about the planet, let's conserve water, like just trying to make it educational and being like, hey, this is what we're going through. But they didn't have to evacuate their house because their neighbors then came out and said that the fire actually never got to their street or their side of California, so there was no way, like their house is still standing. And the neighbors were like, hey, like the house is still standing, actually fully okay. And then they actually changed the title and thumbnail to just sweep down the rug, but they never really addressed it. They just changed the title and thumbnail and moved on with their life. Then they clickbaited their daughter having cancer, which was just like another thing where I was like, okay, they already exploit their kids so much and like put so much of their kids' lives on the internet, that then to use like something like this to gain attention. Anyway, so they posted this thumbnail, and I think I spoke about this before. I think this situation I've spoken about before. Essentially, they did she was diagnosed with cancer, and it was a picture of their whole family, and like it was mainly focusing on their daughter, and it looked like their daughter was diagnosed with cancer, which is obviously a parent's worst nightmare. Their fans were looking at this being like, oh my god, like what's going on, can we find out more? Turns out no, it was just a video about how the daughter had like a scare about something ages ago, and they just now wanted to like talk about it. And instead of just doing like a medical scare title, they did our daughter was diagnosed with cancer, when she just wasn't. It was a scare, but she wasn't diagnosed with cancer. And then they got backlash for it, and then they came back and basically said they just used this to, you know, educate parents and to inform people of how things are and how things happen. I don't know, I just don't think it was appropriate. And then right after that, now this is a pretty controversial topic right now, so let's just brace ourselves. We're talking about abortion and pro-life, pro-choice, etc. I'm personally pro-choice. Let's not argue right now, okay? Mainly with the recent situations going on in America, this is a bit of a controversial topic, but But let's talk about this. They did a pro-life abortion documentary that they premiered on YouTube literally not too long ago, and it was rooted in a lot of like religion and religious ideas and shaming as well. And then they included some women who they were like trying to persuade to not have an abortion, and essentially it was just not a great thing. But recently YouTube actually hid dislikes. If you guys know, if you go on YouTube now, you can only see the likes but you can't see the dislikes, but we on our end can see dislikes still. They still exist. If you dislike, it does come through, it just doesn't show up publicly, it just shows up for us on the back end. But there are still some softwares that you can kind of add to your internet browser where you can see the dislikes. And essentially people went on the video, saw the dislikes, and it is an awful like to dislike ratio, obviously, because it just feels super like backwards and it feels super outdated and just very judgmental of them to do. But they are a very religious family, so I'm not that surprised, because, you know, typically if you're more religious, you are pro-life, and if you're less religious, you're pro-choice. Obviously that's not the case for everyone. I'm just saying as a blanket statement, that's kind of what we could have expected from them. But anyway, that happened, and they actually posted it on Instagram as well, and Instagram took it down immediately. But they actually talked to YouTube and it was fine on YouTube's end, so it stayed up and it's still there. It has multiple millions of views, so you know, it's just another way for them to stir up drama, stir up controversy, and make more money, really. And then we come to the most recent thing, where now they use their son to also stir up views and drama and etc. And they did a video where they clickbaited their son's seizure. Now I'm going to be very delicate about this topic because their son actually did have a seizure. It wasn't like with the daughter where she didn't have cancer but they just clickbaited it. This time their son did have a seizure, and you know, the mum did, you know, cry on camera, and it was quite clearly like very emotional. But I'm not sure if there's almost like a detachment where they don't really notice how damaging the things they do are, which is also a thing that they would need to work on, and maybe like see a therapist and see how they can detach themselves from their job and distance themselves from their job, because it seems to be consuming their life. Oh, of course, if your kid is having a seizure, now I've actually only found this out because I have a dog, and dogs get seizures as well. And most vets will say that if your dog is having symptoms of seizures, or if you think your dog is having a seizure, you should film the whole thing. So when you get to the vets, you can show it to them and they'll see like the progression of how it progressed, if that makes sense. And that'll actually help them cure your dog and help your dog quicker than having to try and like figure out what's going on. So I don't think filming his son during a seizure was like the bad thing to do in this case. It was the fact that he like filmed it and then put it in landscapes, they could put it on YouTube, and then they used their son having a seizure in the thumbnail, and then did that in the title, and then put their son's whole seizure into the YouTube video, which I personally just think is it's just such a personal is not even the right word to use this here, but it's just like the son obviously didn't consent to this, and it is a very personal moment for him, and very, you know, dangerous, and probably something that traumatized him and scared him. So just to then grow up and see his own seizure on the internet might be a very weird and then further traumatizing moment for him. So I just don't know if that was what I would have done personally in this moment. I actually think talking about the seizure itself would have been completely fine with me. Like, I think if they sat down and they just talked about how it was to go through one of their children having a seizure and how they dealt with it, you know, how to not prevent it, but, you know, the best steps to take and what their doctors told them, and like just to give advice to parents, I think that's a great thing. I think when family channels first started, it was like very much like advice based and like helping parents out and like, this is what you need to do and this is how you do it and yada yada yada. And I think it was very helpful. And then they saw the money, and family channels started taking a really weird route, when now like we're filming our children having seizures and posting on the internet with a clickbait title. It just doesn't make sense to me. It doesn't make sense to me. So I think if they had just talked about it, it would have been completely fine. But I think just posting the son having a seizure on the internet just wasn't the move that I would have personally made. But obviously I don't have children. So you guys let me know what you think. Subscribe to the bell, like, comment for engagement, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye guys.